Hey, fitness and sports fans, Coach Frank here. And today I'm going to bring back Rocky Snyder, a guest I had on season 2. He's a great mind for sports. He's done a lot with coaching and rehab of athletes, getting the body to reach its true potential. We've talked about the ankles, the hips, and the mid-back as the 3 pillars to get the body straight and to get it balanced to really reach your true potential. Rocky is really an expert on getting the body right, finding out how to unlock those joints and unlock your potential for flexibility and range of motion is really what he's an expert at, and he's going to talk about that and more right after this. Let's do this.
Game on, sports, fitness, and health fans, with another episode of the Sporting Good Posture Digital Radio Experience. Gear up for Coach Frank's advice from the sidelines as he helps you crush your game, no matter what sports, health, or fitness game you play.
Hey, this is Coach Frank. I'm Sporting Good Posture. What are you sporting?
Hey, Coach, what do you got for us today?
Welcome back to another episode of Sporting Good Posture. This is Coach Frank, and I'm going to be talking about Rocky Snyder today. We had him back on in season 2. We talked a lot about training and just kind of what he does as far as balancing the body. He's really fine-tuned his training now. He's worked with a lot of local sports teams, a lot of athletes, and he's really an expert on getting the true potential out of your body and finding how to unlock those injuries that you've dealt with, or just really improving yourself to get those gains that you're looking for. And we'll get to that interview here in a moment, right after this message.
Hey, Jeremy. Wow, really pumping that iron. Getting buff for summer?
Hey, Haley. Wow, you look amazing. I guess the gym's working out pretty well for you. Wish it was for me. Trying to lose some weight, but no matter what I do, I can't seem to take it off.
Oh, I've been there. I've tried tons of diets and routines and just couldn't take the weight off no matter what I did. It was really depressing.
Well, you obviously did something right. What's your secret?
Actually, my chiropractor.
Your chiropractor? Really?
I was so surprised, but it totally worked. He was doing something called the ChiroThin program.
The ChiroThin program?
The ChiroThin program is designed like no other. Supervised by licensed doctors of chiropractic, ChiroThin is based on your body's natural structure. Following Mother Nature's blueprint, ChiroThin gets to the bottom of all the reasons people have difficulty losing weight and puts you on the road to your ideal body. And that means the ideal you. Hey, Jeremy, you're looking pretty buff. Did you check out the ChiroThin program?
You bet, Haley. Thanks for turning me on to it. For my girlfriend and mom, too. We all had a breakthrough. Can't believe we finally lost the weight.
Well, looks like my loss was your gain. If losing weight is a challenge, get evaluated today for free to see if you are fit for the ChiroThin program at Ideal Health and Wellness Center. Don't just get thin, get ChiroThin. Call 615-567-6683.
He was a guest back in season 2, and we discussed his dealings with athletes and some of the training things that he's come across. And he really reminded me a lot of what chiropractors do and balance. We talked a little bit about your book last time, Return to Center, but I wanted to talk to you more a little bit about some sports that have been more popular lately, especially with this past year. I've found that golf and tennis, some of those individual sports have become really popular again with golf and tennis. I wanted to talk to you first with tennis. Have you had some work with tennis over the years? Because I've had a lot of patients come in that are doing tennis more, and I wanted to see what you recommended as far as any injuries you see commonly and some of the training that you do with athletes for tennis.
Oh, for certain. First, I love being back on the show, Doc. It's a pleasure to be with you again, chatting up a storm. Yeah, heck yeah. And yes, actually, I have a high number of tennis athletes that train in my studio currently. Compared to golfers, I'll say that right now. And just a little side note, with golfers, if they find a secret weapon that allows them to outplay their pals and their friends, they are not going to share that secret weapon with anybody. So that's the one thing about golfers. They're really hard to get referrals from. But tennis players, on the other hand, well, they need to play with other people and they need those people to be healthy. So the more of their friends that can stay fit and stay at the top of their game, well, they're going to send them my way. So they're a great referral source. And yes, in fact, there's a local high school where I go over and put some of the young female athletes through their paces and through some conditioning and some strength routines. But when it comes to tennis and golf, any of the rotary sports, if you're a rotary athlete, meaning you derive a lot of your power and a lot of your competition through the rotation of the body, you really need to be looking at how your body moves, because you've got 360 joints, many of which are going to come into play with a simple tennis serve or a return or a golf swing. And if those joints are not doing what they need to do in a certain timing pattern, then some of that force that you're trying to create is going to be lost. And wouldn't it be nice to be the most forceful, most powerful athlete on the court or out on the greens? Absolutely. And that's really what we're going to talk about. Yeah, unlocking potential.
That's a great point with the rotational sports, because that comes into play with hockey, with baseball, tennis, golf, and really back injuries are one of the most common things that you see in adults, like as far as chronic injuries. What are some of the things that you have done to help people kind of prepare for tennis, like the serve and some of the motions in tennis?
Well, you know yourself that there's 3 areas of the body that are the big buckets, the areas that derive a lot of power through rotational motion, that being the mid-back or the thoracic region of the spine, the hips and pelvic region, as well as the ankles. Now, those are the areas where we get a tremendous amount of rotation and a lot of force is produced there. And then they have to transfer that force through areas that are not meant for a lot of rotation, like the lower back or the knees, or for that matter, the neck. So it's not uncommon for areas that should have a lot of power and rotation. If they become restricted, then they're going to need somewhere else to make up for it. And the neighboring areas, such as the knees and the lower back, and for that matter, the neck, are often the places that are going to compensate. And maybe not initially will anybody notice it, but doing that same repetitive pattern of movement, of compensation, will eventually make for some pretty angry backs. So what I do with most of the Rotary athletes, and it doesn't matter if it's hockey, baseball, a baseball pitcher or batter, a golfer or a tennis athlete, I want to see how well can their joints move through space in 3 dimensions. And I'm really interested in how well can they rotate in their thoracic, their hips, and their ankles. Now, a lot of people think, oh, well, the ankles, I mean, that's just a really small joint, but it's where things begin. That is ground zero with the foot and ankle complex. And if that foot is not in the proper position to allow that ankle to rotate, then you can expect further trouble up the chain in the hips and the mid-back. So I want to look at those 3 big buckets. Can we get them to be a little thawed out? Can we get them to move the way they should? And can they transfer force through the body the way they should?
And I remember going back to our first episode, we talked a lot about that and how the feet are the foundation of the body. And we even talked about, like I do foot levelers, orthotics there. And we've talked about how important it is to stabilize the feet. And I've seen a tremendous difference with people in how far they drive the ball and how straight they drive and how well they'll even shoot a foul shot or hit because they're balanced. The ankles are commonly overlooked. What are you seeing? Are you seeing like these old ankle sprains that just cause a lot of loose joints in the ankles? Or are you seeing more tighter joints in the ankles? What are you usually seeing with that?
It's really the duality of the universe is going to come into play here. You're going to see one or the other, right? You're going to see an ankle that can't maintain good dynamic stability because there's too much laxity, too much movement in it, or it can't maintain good dynamic movement stability because it's all locked up. So either one is not going to be a good recipe for success. I need to take the one that is moving too much. I need to slow that down. And I need to take the one that's not moving fast enough, and I need to speed it up. It's all about a timing pattern. In fact, I went and studied at the Titleist Performance Institute in Oceanside, California, where if you ever watched the Golf Channel, you got Dr. Greg Rose and a few of his cohorts there that are putting on these shows all about proper movement techniques. And they bring up something called the kinematic sequence. And a kinematic sequence is how your joints kind of leapfrog in movement in a certain sequential order to allow force to be carried from one joint through another and through another. And there's a line graph or a kind of a graph that you could look at and outline and compare to somebody else's. Like, this is the ideal kinematic sequence for a golf swing or for a tennis swing or anything like that, a baseball throw. And then you overlay your athlete and you can see where they're too slow or where they're speeding up too quickly, too soon. And then we can start to get information on exactly what you need to do with the person. Now, everyone's an individual, but like you say, injury history is going to be a key factor in understanding how the body is trying to negotiate movement, because that's really what we're talking about. Is the knee is trying to negotiate the movement of the ankle in conjunction with a negotiation with the hip up above. It's this continual negotiation. You throw in an injury, and now there's a new level of negotiation that's having to be considered. And so once you understand that if they've had a history of inversion sprains, if they've got low back issues, if they've got hip bursitis, or if they've got rotator cuff problem, if they broke their thumb, all of these things can come into consideration when you're talking about the golfer, the tennis, or any other rotary athlete.
I notice I'm seeing a lot more hip injuries and old hip injuries that are now, unfortunately, a lot of these people are having to get hip replacements. And really that a lot of that is preventable.
Truly, it doesn't need to get to the level of pathology, right? It doesn't need to get to a place where surgical intervention is required. But even when it does, and they do go and get replaced, now they've got something that is actually quite perfect in its manufacturing process. And you put it in there, and the brain says, okay, now this is different. Now, how are we going to negotiate this?
Yeah.
So I've got a lot of people with joint replacements that are coming in here. I've got an avid tennis player right now that's going to see me in the next hour, and he's in his early 60s, and he's back on the court after not being on the court for a while due to the pain. And what we're encountering is, even though he went through physical therapy and he got on those balance pads and did everything, the protocol of hip replacement needed to be done there's still a tremendous amount of re-education in terms of how he properly moves. And we're seeing it manifest in tweaked Achilles or hamstring, or his external oblique is pulling on the side of his waist, or these things are popping up because the brain is still trying to figure out, wow, how are we going to be on the court now that we've got this hip that's not giving us any pain? So we continually are working with understanding how his hips are moving. Can we get them to move in the way that we want them? How is the ankle behaving with this? Because he's got a history of foot issues. All these things come into this recipe that we're continually tweaking every time he comes in. So one program created for weeks on end, I don't do that. I don't believe that most people should do that, because the body is a dynamic thing. It's always changing.
In general, you talk to people that do workouts or go to the gym, a lot of times they just do the same routine. They'll go on the treadmill, they'll do some exercise for 30 minutes, and then they go home. And you get kind of stuck in that rut. You don't grow muscle, you don't improve your flexibility. One of the episodes we just did, we talked a lot about flexibility, range of motion, and posture, and how it affects the golf swing. But even further, like you said, tennis, hockey, baseball, really anything has those rotational sports really have a lot of movement patterns. And then, if you add in replacement joints, if you're older and you've had some injuries, now you have to relearn that whole process.
Precisely. If you cannot maintain your sport posture, what sport that is, there's an ideal place for you to exist in space to allow you to compete. And that may be in a full-on sprint, or it may be standing on the golf tee, on the driving block, right? It could be getting ready at the baseline to serve. All of these require specific postures. If you cannot acquire that posture, then you are automatically going to have to renegotiate how it is you're going to achieve whatever it is you're looking to do on that playing field. So maintaining posture is good, but acquiring good sport posture, and then not only can I maintain or acquire that sport posture, but now can I create movement while maintaining that posture. So there's many different levels that we're talking about. Flexibility will help to unlock areas to get you into a place. Dynamic stability and static stability will give you the fortitude you need to hold into that place. But then, can you get the nervous system to start behaving in a way where it can control those things and add movement to it? So here's the thing, Doc, is that many trainers out there will say, we're going to do sports-specific training. And they will look at a sport and they will start to select traditional exercises from a gym that somehow mimic a little bit. Like, we're going to do a squat. For some reason, a squat should be in everybody's program, a lot of people think.
Yep.
But I'm going to argue that. I mean, maybe if that is a sport-specific movement for you, or it carries over, it's a derivative kind of thing. Yeah. But I prefer getting people actually in their specific positions that they're going to return a serve. And then I want to see them be able to move in three-dimensional space while they hold that position against resistance or just their own body as acting as resistance. Can I bring in rubber bands? Can I bring in some type of weights, whether it be Indian clubs or dumbbells or even a medicine ball? Can we feed information, neuromuscular information into the framework so that they can be in that place and hold for endurance as well as strength, as well as just getting accustomed to just maintaining that? So, sports-specific training is a different kind of realm in my imagination.
And someone like me who grew up playing a lot of football and just lifting heavy weights, some of the restrictions I have now where I don't have the big strength I did when I was 18, I also have some restrictions from lifting weights, and I'm tight and I'm not as flexible as I should be. And you look at somebody like, Bryson on, for the tour for golf, and he's a big dude, but he's managed to also have the flexibility to hit the ball 400 yards, but not everybody is going to be like that. So with golf specifically, what are some things that you've seen and done that you found that work better than just like traditional exercises, to train for golf?
Well, I look at it like a beautiful meal, a dinner, and on your plate, you've got a whole bunch of different kind of side dishes and a main entree, right? You've got a whole bunch of things. And that's kind of how I look at a conditioning program. Yes, there is going to be strength training. There's going to be weight training, but that's a side dish these days. It used to be the big old steak for me. It used to be the main entree. But these days, I believe with the advance of technology in the last 30 years, personal devices being what they are, and the amount of head dipping down and the amount of seated positions, that we need to rethink this. And that meat and potatoes on the plate is going to be more about motor neurology and mobility, AKA flexibility too. When I say mobility, it's all about the movement of joints. And when we have proper movement of the joints, then the muscles that attach around those bones and those joints are going to have to be pliable. Right. And so there's a pliability or flexibility. And that's one of the keys there, because I know from my studying of I won't say chiropractic medicine, but studying under chiropractors, there's something called the arthrokinetic reflex. And that is the part of your nervous system that will regulate how much strength the muscles are producing based on the information the brain is receiving. So when the brain is sensing that muscles are inflexible or joints are restricted, the brain is going to send down signals to protect that body and say, okay, wait a minute. Let's put a governing wire a little bit lower now so they can't produce as much force, because otherwise they'll get injured. So what about if we did the opposite? What if we got the body to unlock its potential in terms of movement with the joints and the pliability, flexibility of the muscles? Now we actually don't have to spend weeks and weeks trying to increase muscle size in the fiber hypertrophy phases. We can actually upregulate force production in the body just by harnessing the power of the neurological system. So when I learned that, I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, now let's put strength training in one of those little, this is your side of peas or this is your side salad. That's strength training for me. I don't want to diminish the importance of it because it makes up a whole meal, but I'm not going to have that be the center plate. Now, instead, I want to see that they can move properly. Do they move freely? Do they move well? And then, only then, can I start to load movement, AKA strength training, into a body that moves well. Because it makes no sense to take a condemned kind of decrepit structure and throw a whole bunch of weight on the roof. You know what's going to happen there. There's going to be a lot of strain, and eventually it's just going to break down. And I think that's what we've been doing with strength training for the last 20 or 30 years. We've just been throwing lipstick on a pig and saying, just lift more, lift more. Yeah. And now we're having earlier and earlier injuries. And so we got to address that. And I think movement and proper movement is going to be the key.
You look at somebody like Tom Brady. The guy's got 9 touchdown passes in the last 2 weeks. Actually, we're back into fantasy football. I got him on my fantasy team. He's crushing it for me. But you watch the way he trains. it's not about throwing heavy weights around. He does so many sport-specific exercises, range of motion, and just drills that are specifically for being a quarterback. And he's not a big guy. You don't look at him and think he's massive like one of these tight ends or defensive ends or whatever. He's lean. He's got muscle, but he can move. And even at 44, he's doing better than most of the guys in the league, and he's staying healthy by not just focusing on lifting heavy weights. He's doing that variety like you were talking about. Exactly.
And that's exactly what him and his trainer, Alex Guerrero, are doing. They're using a lot of bands. They're doing a lot of foam rolling technique. They're doing a lot of massage for recovery and diet, proper fueling, all those things he has learned in a fairly short amount of time. In the last 10 years, I'd say, after his ACL injury, and I think it was 2007, he really got to start seeing, okay, it was 2006. I take that back. 2007 was the undefeated year, except for your boys got us in the Super Bowl, which we don't have to go there. But anyway, that changed the way in which he began thinking about longevity and training, right? And so now you have him like 5 touchdown passes against Tampa Bay, Atlanta. 5 touchdown passes. And he's done that several times across his career. But he's able to do that at age 44, where everyone is going, this is amazing. I can't believe he's going so far. Well, it's not so amazing to me when you actually have the proper techniques, the proper programming and discipline. It should be something that everyone's going for. In fact, if we want to talk NFL just briefly, I would take all of the linemen and I would stick them on a farm in the middle of the Midwest. And that would be their training regimen. They would get up in the early morning, they'd start lifting hay bales, they would start working on the farm, and they would actually acquire farm strength, not gym strength. Because farm strength is going to carry over much better on the football field. And then I would have them and do a whole bunch of mobility, flexibility work and soft tissue work for reparations.
Well, and it's true because these guys, you look at them, they look like bodybuilders. You know, they're bulky, they're not as flexible as they should be, and they really need that to play their sport. Even as a lineman, these guys are now realizing they need to do yoga, they need to do balance, they need to do bands more so than just throwing up 500 pounds on the bench press or 800 pounds on a squat. Like they're really trying to learn that. But then you see the guys that don't, and they're the ones that aren't advancing. They're getting injured more, and they have that pattern where they get injured every year and they just can't get out of that pattern.
Yeah, I tell you, 2 years ago, as it turned out, my daughter was in high school here in Santa Cruz. And I went up to the coaches on the football team because she was trying out for kicker and defensive back.
That's awesome.
She had a great time. Now she's off to college, and the football coaches are calling her up going, oh, do you want to keep on playing? But now she's playing in the goal for the women's soccer team at her university there. But before that, a couple of years ago, I went up to the coaches and said, hey, I'd love to help out in the weight room if you don't mind. I'd love to take a look at your program. And if you're open to some suggestions, I'm happy to kind of meet with you and talk about it. And they were open as could be. I couldn't have asked for a more humble coaching crew. I was not expecting what it was. They gave me kind of the key to the city when it came to the weight room. And I went in and I took their program, which, like you said, it was a bodybuilding program. Yeah. So you had bench press and bicep curls and a whole bunch of isolated exercises that were just working on beefing up muscles in one area, but not teaching the body how to produce force on a football field. So we revamped that entire program, and they went from a losing season the year before to the furthest. And this is not because of the program solely. It was because of the coaches and the athletes they had on the team. But I like to think that a portion of this was the conditioning that we did. But
absolutely,
they went to the furthest they've ever gone in school history to the playoffs, and they almost won the state championship. I think they were only a game away from achieving that goal. But the athletic trainer that stood on the sidelines, and I was able to stand with her by her table, she said, okay, you do that thing with the joints that you do, and I'll tape them up and I'll give them I'll ice them down and do what I do, and we'll get this going. I think she only ran out on the field, the athletic trainer. Maybe on average, she might have had to run out about once every game or every other game to address a player that was on the field. Most of the time, the players would run off. They'd come see us, would work on joint mobility and get them really functioning again. That issue would be diminished. They'd run back out and play. Meanwhile, the other teams that were going, the athletic trainer, it felt like they were part of the offense because every play somebody was getting hurt. And I attribute most of that to the kind of conditioning programs that are out there, unfortunately, in a lot of the high school programs, and for that matter, some of the college programs. I won't go as far as the pros, but because they're changing. But there does need to be a change at the lower levels for sure.
It is. It's very archaic. It's similar, 20 years ago when I was in high school. It seems like they're still on that power, strength, and they're not really moved past that because that's how these coaches are trained. So that's what they know and that's what they do.
Yeah.
And it does. Like you see now so many injuries, lower body injuries, knee, ACL tears, and some of these non-contact injuries that we see, a lot of Achilles injuries now. And these really go from a lack of mobility of the foot, and the whole kinetic chain is off. And then overtraining certain exercises and undertraining other things is a lethal combination for injuries.
Truly. Like the quarterback on that team, while we're doing they asked me to come in for like a mobility day on a Friday afternoon after school when practice was happening. And I had everyone just assess their own ability to move, like a simple toe touch, standing where you are with your legs straight. Who can touch their toes? Who can't? And the quarterback just smiled. And he was like, I've never been able to touch my toes. Okay, granted, he's only 17 years old and he's only been standing for the last 15. But out of those 15, he's never been able to touch his toes. And we did some movements, and not only mobility, but we activated the deeper intrinsic muscles that are supposed to maintain good dynamic stability. And his hamstrings, most likely, were trying to do the job of those muscles that weren't activated. But once we activated it, opened up his hips, I had everybody retest their toe touch, and he just had this blank stare. His jaw dropped. He touched his toes, and he was blown away. He's like, what the heck? And I said, imagine if you get most of your power throwing a football from your hips and from your feet, and now you can touch your toes. How much more power are you going to have on your passes? And then he went out and had a stellar All-American season. So it's something else. You start getting the right things to move, and you get the proper reactions to happen. And you take an athlete that's been struggling and you turn them into a near Olympian just by giving them what they need. It's remarkable. It's almost magic. But
that's really impressive. In my practice now, I'm starting to see more kids coming in as athletes. And I just had a kid this week that came in that thought he had a concussion. We tested him and he didn't, but he's had 4 previous concussions. And I'm seeing a lot more of that now, a lot of these concussion injuries that linger and then they get multiple concussions after that. Have you come across concussions and some of those over the years too?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Subconcussive injuries, much more common than true concussions. The concussion's easy to detect. That's quite simple. But the subconcussive injuries are more, I would say, detrimental than anything else because they don't get detected and they continue working. So through the help of this company called Z Health, an educational platform that actually started by a chiropractor himself, Dr. Eric Cobb, we do some visual work and vestibular work with some of the athletes that come in here. We assess their visual ability because the vision goes to 70% of the brain. And if we want to affect brain function, we could actually do some visual drills, some vestibular drills, and see if we can't get things functioning a little bit better at a little higher rate than where they currently are. So we utilize that quite a bit. And definitely now that there's awareness of concussions and there are protocols out there, it's a step in the right direction. It doesn't take away from the fact that they're still occurring. And the athletes of today are structurally weaker on average than, say, when we were growing up, because we grew up climbing trees, going to the playground and getting outside and playing. And if we needed to play some Atari or something else, we actually had to go to an arcade. It wasn't on our phone. It wasn't, if we wanted to communicate with somebody, we actually had to spend some time either putting our finger around a rotary or hitting buttons. I mean, that was a lot of work compared to what you do today, where you can just call into your phone and say, hey, Siri, blah, blah, blah. So anyway,
you have to walk to somebody's house to just pop in.
Can you imagine? You just add those little things up, and structurally, your body is being encouraged to do more than today's kids that are being shuttled from one place to another for a play date or for organized sports. And then we haven't even talked about the year-round athlete where the parents have this idea of college tuition, scholarships. And if we just keep the little Johnny in a soccer league all year round, he's going to be ready for British Premier League, when in truth, he's probably going to burn out. He'll probably never want to play that game again, or he won't have enough cross training, and it'll lead to a higher rate of injury. So there's something to be said about multi-sport athletes too. And we haven't even touched on that.
I'm seeing that. I think it's starting to get addressed a little bit more, because there was a long period of time here where, and you see it a lot, these kids that are pitchers and they're pitching all year round, they're blowing out their arm in high school and they're getting Tommy John way earlier in their career, or sometimes multiple times. But yeah, there's too much specialization in general for just one sport. And there's not enough activity besides that sport, or like you said, just going out and playing outside, climbing trees and just having a pickup game with your friends or whatever. So you're right. Like, that has gone out the window, and these people are just playing these one sport all year round. And it really, I see it too. I see these same injuries over and over again that happen because of it.
And you can say the same about tennis. Golf, however, what's interesting about golf, Doc, is that at least with the Titleist Performance and Nike Golf, when it comes to junior golf programs, they do very little golfing with their golfers. As silly or as illogical as that may sound, they are more about play, more about getting the proper kind of skill sets underneath these athletes, these young growing golfers. And yeah, they'll go swing the club a little bit and hit a half bucket of balls, but more importantly, they're getting all the fundamental movement patterns established before they really begin to get more finite with their golf instruction. And because of that, it's fun, because most kids, if you tell them, okay, we're going to go do golf lessons, they're going, oh gosh, that's about as great as watching paint dry on a wall. But if you go to these places where they're doing junior golf programs, and there's obstacle courses, and there's jumping pads and trampolines or rope swings or whatever, they're going, whoa, this is cool. This is golf training. You bet your life this is golf training, because we're going to train you to be a full rounded athlete. So when you go and grab that club, you're going to have what it takes to actually understand proper mechanics.
I think kids really appreciate that, like just that stretching thing you were talking about, where that kid could touch his toes now just by doing a few different things. I think they can quickly see how valuable that is and relatable that is. And then just talking about somebody like Tom Brady and some of the new training techniques, and it does create longevity and less injuries over time.
If you want them to buy in to what it is you're trying to promote, then there needs to be not only good coaching and communicating, but there's got to be some evidence that this is actually going to make you it has the potential of making you a higher level athlete. And it's not just trust what I'm saying. You got to show them. You got to walk the talk, so to speak, and let them feel it in their own bodies that, wow, there's this, I don't know why this is working. I don't really care. Coach told me to do this, and this is what's happening. I'm following the Pied Piper right down the street. That's really what it is. I
love that. What would you say to people, whether they're a kid or an adult, or they're a serious athlete, or just, a weekend warrior, about ways to reach their true potential? What would you recommend to them?
As simple as it could be just walking every day. If you find that you are low level activity, you need to increase your activity. And it doesn't have to be intense activity. Walking is one of the most beneficial ways to restore function in the human form. So anybody will tell you, an office worker gets out of their office setting and they go for a 5-minute lunch break walk. When they come back, it's different. So it could be as simple as just getting up and walking. But if you choose to do something at a more moderate degree of intensity, such as maybe mountain biking or jogging or swimming or any other activity, just do it fairly regularly. You don't have to do it every day. We want to do things in moderation, and continually exploring movement is a key. So don't just find something you enjoy and stay with that, but explore novel movements, do things you haven't tried before, challenge your body to do something that may require a little effort on your part, because that means that the body and the brain are learning. If you go and do the same program and you're going to the gym and you've done your same routine for more than, say, 3 weeks, change it up. I would do it every day, every time you go in the gym. But if you feel like you want to get something accomplished over 3 weeks and you want to harness in whatever, some perfect the form, go for it. But then change it up and do something more challenging. The brain is constantly changing. Neuroplasticity is a common term now that tells us the brain does not stop growing and changing no matter what age you are. So my goal in my life is to continually change and challenge myself. And because of that, fortunately, I can't complain about any physical ailments. I don't have any.
That's excellent. I love to hear that. Challenging your mind, challenging your body. If you don't use it, you lose it. And too many people get inactive as they get older, if they get married, or if they have injuries, or just not reading books or not challenging their mind. Like, that's so true. You have to be able to grow, because you just don't get better if you're not challenging those things.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, just my last thing would be, it's not the aging process. It's the activity process. If you're not staying active, your aging will increase. Mm-hmm. And if you stay active, your youthfulness will increase. And that's why we've got 80-something-year-olds running marathons or doing triathlons. We've got a 44-year-old NFL quarterback, because they're staying active in the proper way.
And that's the thing I tell patients too. We all get older. We're all going to age, but you want to age gracefully. And in this world now, it's so important to really stay on top of your health, be preventative instead of, be proactive instead of reactive. And with no matter what it is, just staying ahead of that, so it never gets to the point where you've now lost your health and you're trying to regain it.
Well said.
Thank you. Well, Rocky, I love talking to you. I always get a lot out of this, and the listeners do too. Where can they contact you? Like Facebook, Instagram?
I'm on Facebook, Rocky Snyder, SNYDER. I'm on Instagram, same name. I've got a YouTube channel, which is Rocky Snyder, CSCS for Certified Strength Conditioning Specialist. I've got a couple podcasts myself, the RockFit Files and Zealous podcast, where Zealous, I actually interview some colleagues that are strength conditioning coaches in the NFL, in Major League Baseball, the NHL, and the Olympics, and so on. Wow. if you geek out on strength conditioning and you want to know what the pros behind the pros are doing, then the Zealous podcast is a good time. ZELOS, Zealous. It's one of the winged gods, like Nike is the winged god of victory. Zealous is the winged god of competition. So the Zealous podcast. And then RockySnyder.com is my website that you can go there. It should be right up on the list next to yours, because yours is everywhere podcasts are heard also. That
is something I would like to hear about, the behind the scenes training that these guys are doing, because I'm always interested in hearing that.
Yeah, it's a fun conversation for sure.
And don't forget your book, Return to Center. I know that you're very proud of that too.
Thank you. Yeah. And hopefully it's just offering an alternative to strength conditioning, kind of like what we were talking about with Tom and Alex and how they're offering alternative. It goes kind of parallel with what they're doing. It's got about 150 videos embedded into the book with QR codes, so you can have yourself kind of like a pocket trainer helping you assess what you need and then show you the movements that might help you get where you want to go.
Well, again, I appreciate you coming on, and it's always a pleasure speaking with you. And your knowledge is so valuable, and I know that myself and the listeners really appreciate that.
It's just double fold for me coming back at you. I really have a great time, and the best student is the one that teaches, because it just embeds information into me. So selfishly speaking, thank you for helping me learn a little bit more today.
You're welcome. Thank you. And thank you for being on the show again.
All right.
Rocky's got that great book, Return to Center, and check it out, because it really is a guide on how to train and how to really isolate some of the injuries that you've been dealing with. The biggest thing, like I tell you guys, with all the injuries that you've dealt with, just knowing where you're at. You have to know where you're at before you can really know where your true potential could be. Just look in the mirror. Check to see how your body looks when you just look in the mirror. Does it look misaligned? Is one shoulder higher than the other? Is your head kind of tilted? Is your hip higher than the other? Is your knee turned in? Is your foot turned in? These are the things that you'll notice just by looking in the mirror. And if you're dealing with any injuries and you've noticed some imbalances in your body, it's worth getting checked out. That's where I come in. I'd love to donate some of my time to you. Just mention this episode And I would love to check out what's going on with you. We can evaluate your golf swing. We can evaluate anything sports related at my office. I really want to help you reach your true potential. And if you find out what's going on, then we can figure out how to fix it. So if you have any questions for me, or if you want to find out how far you are from nature's athletic blueprint for your body, I'm always happy to help and get them answered for you. And I wouldn't think of charging you for these recommendations, even if I have to comp a little bit of my time in person in the process. You can follow me and DM me on Instagram at Sporting Good Posture, or PM me on Facebook at Ideal Health and Wellness Center. Tell me what's going on, and I'll tell you what I think. Remember, the coach's door is always open. This is Coach Frank. I'm Sporting Good Posture. How about you?
The Sporting Good Posture Podcast is a broadcast wellness production powered by Ideal Health Wellness Center. All content copyright 2021. All rights reserved. Executive producer Frank Sardella. Coach Frank appears courtesy of Ideal Health Wellness Center in Franklin. For more information, visit sportinggoodposture.com and follow Coach on Instagram at Sporting Good Posture.